And so just carrying on then, can you explain the process and procedures in place to manage conflicts of interest within the judiciary? And in that, I mean in terms of a judge hearing a case and the participants in the case.
Yes. Well, firstly, there is an express requirement to consider conflicts of interest in the Judicial Code, the existing Judicial Code, and in the draft of the new Judicial Code. So that's entirely front and centre for any judge. And indeed, any judge who's been a lawyer, and particularly a law officer, will be very mindful of the idea of conflict of interest. Conflict of interest is managed in a number of different ways. The first way is simply by when the case is allocated. I'll give you an example from my own situation. When I get a court list, which says what I'm doing next week or the week after, or I have a court list with the fixtures for the next year, I will go through it, and if I see a name I recognise and I say, is that X or Y, inquiries will be made, and if it is X or Y, I will simply decline from sitting. I'll say, no, I'm not going to sit. I know that person too well, or they're connected to me in some way, shape or form, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to sit. And that I will do that, the Deputy Bailiff will do that, all of the commissioners will do that, and the jurats will do that when these things are identified. Sometimes it's not apparent on the surface of the title of the cases who's involved, who the witnesses may be, what the connected parties may be. In those circumstances, it may be close to the trial when the papers are available to us that we look through and think, hang on, I really shouldn't be, sitting on a case where my third cousin twice removed is giving evidence, and I didn't know they were going to be giving evidence. So in those circumstances, again, we would step down, and my judicial secretary is adept at moving courts around to ensure that there's no difficulty. Similarly, the other way in which it's dealt with is by the parties. Either a party will, when they're listing a court, will say, we're aware that the bailiff knows Mr. X, or Commissioner X knows Mr. AB. They should not sit, and they will not be allocated to the case. That will be taken at face value. If, notwithstanding all of those things, there reaches a point where a judge is sitting on a case and one party or another says that they shouldn't be sitting on the case, it is open to that party to make a recusal application. You make it to the judge and you say, Judge, you should not be sitting because you have an actual conflict or an appearance of a conflict, and you shouldn't do it. And the judge will apply the proper legal process and analysis set out in various cases. We have the same system as they have in the United Kingdom, the same judicial tests. And if the judge agrees, he or she will recuse themselves, and they will step back from the case, and the case will have to be relisted before different judges. If the judge doesn't agree, well, then the case will continue to be heard, but then that failure to recuse can be challenged before the Court of Appeal.
Okay, thank you. And do you keep a record within the judicial graph, for example, of where recusal has been asked for, and or conflicts of interest are discussed, or the reason why a judge doesn't feel he should recuse himself?
Well, the reason why a judge doesn't feel if there's a recusal application, the judge will give a decision as to why he's not or is recusing himself. And so that will be a report of the court proceedings in the same way anything else will be, and will be reflected possibly in a judgment, possibly in an act of the court, possibly both. If it's done informally on the list, no. The judicial secretary will simply take at face value the judge saying I shouldn't sit, or won't allocate it to a judge if the parties say there's a good reason why the judge shouldn't sit. Sometimes my judicial secretary might come to me and says, Advocate X says, you know, Mr. Y, perhaps you shouldn't sit on this case. And I might ask for further information, but normally I will take that at face value and simply won't sit on the case.